right, it looks like the participants have steadied out, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our South of Stevensville Safety Improvement Project Open House. My name is Amy Aiello. I'm the communication manager for this project, and if you do happen to receive the weekly updates, you've likely seen my name before because I am the one sending those out on Friday mornings. So tonight we are going to see a presentation from the project team about the South of Stevensville Safety Improvement Project, its details, timeline, expectation, and much more. In case your question does not get answered during the actual presentation itself, we're also going to conduct a question and answer session at the end. If you look to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should notice an icon indicating a chat function. Using this, you can submit a question at any time, and we'll make sure it gets answered during that Q&A. My colleague, Katie Cleets, is on the call, and she'll be the one facilitating that discussion. So on the screen now, you should see the presenters for tonight's open house. We've got Bob Vosen and John Schmidt from the Montana Department of Transportation, Cody Salo from Dowell, Peter Walker Kelleher from DJNA, Brendan Dennehy from First Mark Construction, and me, Amy Aiello, with Big Sky Public Relations. You'll see in the right side column the list of the other members of the project team. So you'll hear from the panelists listed on the left tonight and can follow up with any of them after through an email or a phone call directly to me. My information will be listed at the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce the Montana Department of Transportation's District 1 Administrator, Bob Vosen, to speak about why the project is necessary.
Sorry, Amy, I was trying to open my panel and somehow I managed to lose my notes. So everybody is going to have to bear with me for just a moment.
No problem. Thanks, Bob.
What an unfortunate timing on me. I was trying to find my mute button and close the notes. So
oh, that's all right.
Now I lost the whole screen. I love technology. Sorry, everyone, hang tight. Oh. All right, I finally found my notes. Sorry for that delay, everyone. To start with, I do want to thank everyone for taking time to join us with the open house. I recognize this definitely isn't my favorite way of performing open houses. I'd rather be able to meet everyone in person. But as we try to get through what is hopefully the tail end of these challenging times, I do appreciate you taking your time out to join us in this fashion. Hopefully we'll be back to in-person meetings as well. So we do appreciate the patience of everyone with this project. We know it's been a long time coming and we're really looking forward to getting started. The project is really important to us because it's the epitome of MDT's Vision Zero initiative, making safety improvements like this lead to zero deaths on Montana highways and reducing those fatal and serious crashes. We've talked to so many neighbors in the area that have lost loved ones on this stretch of the roadway. So we were anxious to get this construction started and really work towards having a safer Eastside Highway. And I will be at the open house through the Q&A. So I really encourage you to reach out with questions. It's not as optimal as being in person, but do use the chat button down at the bottom and give us questions. Most of you or many of you already know, this stretch of the Eastside Highway from North Birch Creek Road to Pine Hollow Road has significant crash pattern. We've learned through previous traffic studies that the most frequent crashes are due to lane departures and rollovers. The narrow roadway and the slopes and lack of rumble strips are among reasons named as our key contributors to the crash rates in this area. So every solution that's been identified for this project address these elements of the roadway, which Cody's going to speak to in more depth later. So overall, we want everyone, all of our neighbors and friends, to be able to come home safely from their commutes. And we know that making these safety improvements now is going to help make that a reality. MDT really cares about the safety of the traveling public, and every decision that we make is data driven and ultimately in line with our goal of Vision Zero and 0 deaths on Montana highways. That's a ambitious goal. I get called out a lot on that goal and saying it's unattainable. But my response always is, whether it's unattainable, what is an acceptable number of deaths? And the only answer is we have to strive to 0 deaths. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Schmidt, the Missoula District Construction Engineer, who will now talk about the area, the project area, and the timeline.
Thanks, Bob. Hi, everyone. I'm John Schmidt, and as Bob said, I'm the District Construction Engineer for the Missoula area. And I'm going to be talking about the project's proximity and timeline. And as both Bob and Amy mentioned, if you have any questions that come up from these slides, go ahead and leave them in the chat, and we can address them during the Q&A session. I'll start off by noting that the only work taking place will be on the Eastside Highway, no other adjoining roads at this time. The work area was determined by specific data sets as required by the federal government. Because this project is able to be completed with federal safety funding, MDT cannot add any new roadway improvements to this plan. We do understand there are some concerns about the nearby roads, such as Logan Road, and want you to know that we fully acknowledge and share these concerns. Some of the questions we've received have been about the stretch of Eastside Highway north of Stevensville, which will actually be addressed in the North of Stevensville North project. And to find out more about that project, you can find it on MDT's active projects webpage, or reach out to Amy and she can get you more information about it. For this project, the South of Stevensville Safety Improvement Project, we are beginning work at the intersection of North Birch Creek Road and Eastside Highway. Throughout the summer, this work will migrate north, eventually ending at the intersection of Pine Hollow Road. And speaking of the work taking place this summer, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the timeline. As of now, we have already completed the design, permitting, and right-of-way acquisition necessary for the project. You've probably also heard either through Amy's weekly update or ads that we're currently working on tree removal and utility relocation. We will enter full active construction later this spring, starting on the heavier tasks that Cody will speak to in a few. During this active construction, we're expecting to see some delays, which is something else we will discuss tonight. This project is slated to be complete in the fall of 2022. All right, Cody, you're up.
All right, thanks, John. Hi there, my name is Cody Salo, and I'm the design manager for this project with Dowell, and I'll be speaking about what we'll be doing to make the roadway safer. So there's a handful of things that we're going to do to improve the safety out there. The first improvement we'll be making is widening the shoulders along both sides of the highway. So this will allow vehicles to pull off the road and provide more room for bicyclists and pedestrians. This also provides drivers with more room to correct if they need to swerve or depart the main travel lane of the roadway. And with many slower moving vehicles, including the farm equipment that you all see out there, those wider shoulders also provide more space for all modes of travel and just generally improve the safety. The second improvement we're going to do is we're going to flatten out the roadside slopes, and this will provide a safer and more level roadway. So those safer, flatter slopes tend to mitigate lane departure crashes. So if you do leave the paved surface, you're going to end up on something much more smooth and hopefully get back onto the roadway without any kind of an issue. So on top of that, we're also going to include rumble strips, those vibrating bumps on both the center line and the sides of the road. So that will alert motorists to kind of wake them up or notice them if they start to depart their lane. And that also works to protect pedestrians and cyclists who are also utilizing the shoulders. You know, rumble strips are a proven method to avoid head-on collisions, and they also help for veering off the road. And so we do appreciate and encourage that kind of a safety improvement on this project. The other things we're going to do, we're going to remove some trees that are potentially dangerous to vehicles that do leave the road. And then we're going to update some guardrail sections throughout the corridor to meet current safety standards. So with all those things combined, that will create a much safer roadway and ultimately reduce the amount of severe crashes that we see along this stretch of highway. So let's get into some specifics. Let's take a look at the Bell Crossing intersection and talk about some of the upgrades that are going to happen there. So that intersection at Bell Crossing is actually going to get quite an update. So I'm really excited to share some of those safety improvements that we're going to see out there. It's getting some really neat technology. First off, we're going to have some radar detection, which is state of the art. So instead of just having a constantly flashing light out there, it's actually going to be more of an interactive system. So it's going to have a blinking yellow light. It's going to have a signal that's optimized to begin blinking once there's vehicles in the area that have been detected by the radar. So as a vehicle approaches the highway, the stop signs along Willoughby Lane and Bell Crossing will begin flashing, alerting those drivers and vehicles to they're approaching that intersection, that there's somebody else in the vicinity. So it really is kind of interactive in the way that it will react and notice people as they're approaching. In addition to that updated signal and all the radar detection, we're also going to include some overhead lighting. We're going to do some really nice LED lighting that have a special pattern to illuminate the roadway at the intersection, and that'll also help improve the safety there. Let's talk about the replacement of the bridges at Willoughby Creek and Webfoot Ditch. Yeah, so we're going to replace those existing timber bridges. Both of those bridges are in pretty poor shape. They're actually built in 1947. And so we're going to put in some concrete box culverts. You know, a concrete box culvert is a rectangular structure. It allows for water to flow underneath the roadway, but really when you drive over the top of it, it just looks like you're driving on a standard road. And they will be concrete, like I said earlier, and so they're going to last for decades. They're very durable. They're definitely something that will withstand the test of time. So now that we've covered what we're going to do with the project, let's talk about the sequencing of those events so you kind of have an understanding of where we're going with the project. So as I mentioned earlier, we're currently removing the trees to improve the safety. That's actually taking place this week and next week. And we're also taking the utilities and we're relocating them beyond what we call the clear zone, but basically that area where we're going to flatten those slopes so that you have a safe place to depart the roadway if you happen to with your vehicle. So those utilities are all going to move, power poles, little boxes, things like that. So the next thing we're going to do is relocate the irrigation ditches, and we're going to install drainage pipes, and we're going to start to replace those bridges. Those bridges will probably happen later in the fall, but we'll prepare for that by basically going out and flattening those roadway slopes and grading all that. And then once that's done, we'll go ahead and pave to provide a smooth path for all the motorists and cyclists to prolong the life of the roadway and prevent further maintenance. We're also going to chip seal and so forth. So that's going to be a nice improvement to make sure that roadway lasts for a really long time, because we want to save the taxpayer dollars and just want to avoid that major reconstruction that happens if you don't maintain the roadway. So that's the final step for the paving. What we'll do after that is come back and restripe everything, and we're going to do all new signage up and down the corridor so that it basically looks and feels like a brand new roadway. So with that, let's talk to Brendan Dennehy and have him get into some of the construction and the paving.
Thanks, Cody. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Brendan Dennehy, and I'm the project manager for First Mark Construction. As Cody mentioned, I'll give you a brief rundown about what the paving process is going to look like for this project. We're starting with the tree removals, which Cody said this week and carry on till next week. Removing the trees not only help the driver's visibility, but it also allows us to have more room for wider shoulders to be constructed. As you can see in the photos on the slide, the process of constructing these wider shoulders will include milling and sealing of the new pavement. We are looking at a 4-day process for this, and we will plan to work in 2-mile increments. As a sequence of events, slides show this will be the second to last step of the project and has potential to carry into the spring and summer of 2022. Let's next talk about this is going to affect the commutes through Stevensville. During the summer months, we're going to have traffic down to 1 lane with flaggers and traffic control measures in 2-mile stretches. This will likely lead to some traffic delays. At this time, we do not foresee any delays being over 15 minutes. Amy is going to keep you all updated through the weekly updates to let you know when to expect this work and the delays that are going to take place. With that, Amy, why don't you take us home?
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Brendan, and thanks to all the other panelists for speaking about the different aspects of the project. So we have now reached that Q&A portion of the open house. So with that, Katie Cleats, why don't you go ahead and take over?
Thanks, Amy. So our first question is from Ray, and Ray is asking if private residents can hire a truck and driver to haul asphalt gradings to use for their private use. So Cody, I think we're going to turn questions over to you, and then whatever you can have, maybe get back over to first, Mark.
No, that sounds good. Brendan can probably jump in on this one, but I'll start off. So I guess I'll start off with our schedule. There is kind of a tight schedule to get this work done. And so our team's going to work as best we can to be efficient out there and get as much work done this year. So I guess there is kind of a focus on our project. I understand that you probably have some interest in some of these other benefits that could happen with either the millings or some other kind of work that might be done in conjunction with our project, kind of on a private front. But I guess I'll let Brendan maybe jump in and just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. Right now, the millings, we will not mill the road until the beginning of 2022, the spring. Right now, all of the millings will be going to Jake Yoder's pit, Yoder Sand and Gravel. After that, Jake can sell you those millings or haul them to you or whatever may come.
Thanks, Cody, and thanks, Brendan. I think that answered that question, but Ray, if you still have follow-up, feel free to throw that into the Q&A and we can circle back to it. So next question is from Cynthia, and she is asking about projects potentially in the other area. So we had talked earlier, Cody, about the fact that this project is just on the Eastside Highway, but her question is more about Winters Lane. And she's saying that she lives on Winters Lane about 2 miles south of Pine Hollow. And that seems to be the only road off of the Eastside Highway for many miles in each direction that isn't paved. And she's wondering what the process might be to try and get that roadway paved.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. I have a feeling maybe the MDT folks might know a little more. My guess is that Winters Lane is actually probably a county road if it's a public road. And so if that's the case, you probably need to actually get in touch with the county and see if there's some way to get some sort of an improvement district formed. I guess I'm not in particular up to speed with Ravalli County and how they actually do those sorts of improvements, but that's usually kind of the process is you approach the county first, and then you ask them to assist you in essentially developing some sort of an improvement district. And then all of your neighbors have to agree to participate and financially contribute to that. So I don't know, John or Bob, maybe do you have anything else to add to that one?
Yeah, Cody, that was a great answer. It's Winters Lane it's one of two. It's either a county road. I suspect it's a county road. I pulled it up and was looking at it on Google Map. Judging by the size of it, I would suspect it's a county maintained road. So your answer was spot on. They'll have to get with the county commissioners and try to approach them about what steps their specific county has for requesting improvements to their roadways.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. I think that answered that question. So we'll move to the next. Phil is asking a great question for you, Cody. He's wondering if the actual paved width of the roadway might change. So Amy, do you want to go back to that typical section shot while Cody explains this?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'll actually just delay here a second so we can get back to that slide because I can tell the story there. Okay, So in that graphic, you can see there's a new shoulder called out. There's a little point going down to that area. And so we are going to widen the roadway. We're actually going to add 4 feet on each side. So the roadway total width is going to increase by 8 feet. And so the point of that is to actually put a shoulder on it. So it'll have a standard 12-foot lane in each direction. And then we'll have 4-foot shoulders on each side, which is a nice standard roadway section. So you've got a place where you can have a little extra room on the side there. And then again, those roadway slopes are also going to get very flat. Just maybe to try to describe that for you, a lot of them are actually 45 degrees. They're like 1-to-1s and even like 2-to-1s somewhere in there. We're going to make them all the way flat out to like 6-to-1. So it's 6 feet horizontal to 1 foot vertical change. And this graphic here actually shows it fairly close to the scale that we're going to do this work to. So between those wide shoulders and extra width there, and then having that flat area outside the roadway, it's really going to help out.
Thanks, Cody. Next, we have a question about Bell Crossing and wondering if the roadway will be realigned at Bell Crossing to go straight through from Bell Crossing to Willoughby Lane.
Perfect question. That is actually going to happen with our project. We are going to realign Willoughby Lane. We're going to put a slight curve in it and get it all lined up with Bell Crossing. So that's actually part of the safety improvement that's going to take place at that intersection. So great question. And the answer is yes, we're going to make that better.
We like those answers.
Yep.
Thanks, Cody.
Yep.
All right. Next is from Paul. And Paul, we met almost 2 years ago now. Paul is the transportation supervisor at the Stevensville school. And he's just commenting that he hopes that we can wait for work to start until after 8 p.m. So that they can get those 2 bus routes through during construction season.
Yes, and that's also a really good question. And we'll need to coordinate with the school district on those bus routes. Brendan, do you want to jump in at all about that coordination effort?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Cody. Yes, we will start after 8 o'clock. We are trying to get all the traffic through town, through the schools, make sure everybody's safe. But yes, that is our plan also as being the contractor is after 8 o'clock. So.
Thanks, Brendan. And along those same lines, we had a question from Mariah, and she's wondering what the hours of road work will be when you're taking place and if 2 lanes will be fully open in the evenings.
Yes, 2 lanes will be fully opening in the evenings. I would say time would be from 8 o'clock till 5:30 or 6 o'clock before we shut down. But yes, 2 lanes will be open each night at by the time we're done working.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out that during the day when we are working, we are going to have basically one-way traffic. So you'll be able to go one direction, then we'll alternate, go the other direction, kind of a typical highway traffic control scenario. So we'll try to turn over those lanes as fast as we can, but understand that you will have some delay during the day while we're working.
Perfect. Thank you. Next, Cody, another question for you. Jaylene is wondering exactly how far north the project goes. And so she's saying that they live very near Pine Hollow Road and are wondering if the irrigation intake area for the supply ditch will be affected.
Yeah, so the limits of the project actually stop just short of Pine Hollow Road by a few hundred feet. And so we won't be getting all the way into that particular irrigation situation, as I recall. We are kind of stopping. There's a series of houses just before Pine Hollow, and that's actually where we'll be terminating our project. We have to end right there. So I don't think we'll be getting into that particular situation with that irrigation system.
Thanks, Cody. Hopefully that answered that question, Jaylene. Again, feel free to add more if we need to follow up.
Yeah, Brett, if there are more specifics, please get a hold of us or send us an email. We'll definitely follow up with you on that.
Thanks, Cody. Next question is from Terry, and he's wondering where we'll get the fill needed to flatten the existing ground.
Great question. Yep, you're right. So we're going to have to borrow some material from somewhere. In order to make it all flatter, we got to bring in material. So Maybe Brendan, do you want to elaborate just a little bit on what the plan is for bringing in material and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are getting the material for the 6-to-1 slopes, like Cody mentioned prior, from Jake Yoder, Yoder Sand and Gravel. We are trying to keep everything local in Stevensville to support the contractors and the existing businesses around there. So Jake Yoder is where we'll be getting all of our material from.
Thanks, Brendan. Next, excuse me, my voice is dying this evening. Jean Belangini, hi Jean. Jean is asking if the bridges will be bike and pedestrian friendly, optimally with a protected sidewalk, or will they remain narrow?
Okay, I'll see if I can explain this. So the box culverts, we're putting in box culverts, like I had said earlier. Maybe Amy, could you roll back to that picture for just a minute? That might be helpful. So if I can explain this, those bridges that are out there currently are super narrow, as you know, and they have a little bit of guardrail on them. When we're done, these boxes are actually very long. In fact, they're approaching like 100 feet long or so. And so when you drive over the top of it, it'll actually just appear like you're driving right down the roadway, no bridges or anything. Those ends are going to be so far away from the roadway. You'll actually have that full 4-foot shoulder coming through, as well as some really flat slopes out there. And you might just drive by and not even notice that you went over a culvert like that. So it'll look very different when we're done.
Cody, I can't remember. Is there guardrail across the box culvert, or did we get wide enough to not even need guardrail?
We're actually wide enough, we don't even need guardrails. So we're going to provide all that area out there for safety.
Thanks, Cody and Jean. Feel free to add more if there are any additional questions, or you know where to find us afterwards if you want to talk more about that. Cynthia is asking a question about animal collisions. And so she's saying that she's hoping the widening will also help with deer collision. Wondering if we have any statistics on that.
Oh, we have some astute people in the audience tonight. That's great. So you are exactly right. So by basically flattening this all out and taking out some of that vegetation and those trees and so forth, you're actually going to have a lot more room to see those animals that might be in the ditch that want to maybe cross. And so it's an improvement for you as a motorist. You'll actually have a lot more time to react when you can see them like that, instead of them hiding down in a ditch. We did take a look at some of the crash statistics, and that is a concern. There are some wildlife vehicle collisions that are of note along the corridor, certainly. The improvements that we're going to make between the widening of the shoulders, the flatter slopes, and kind of getting all that vegetation out of the way, that helps mitigate that issue with those wildlife collisions.
Thanks, Cody. I think that's quite well said. I don't see any additional questions at this time, but we still have a few folks. Oh, there's one. But just for other folks who are continuing to listen in, what we were talking about, if you do have a question, are the Q&A at the very bottom of the screen. It looks like 2 chat bubbles, and you can go ahead and type the question in there and we'll be able to get to them. So the next that we have up for you, Cody, is that Cindy's followed up by saying she knows of one dip south of Pine Hollow Road that always has deer dying. And so she's wondering if we'll put up any signage or things like that to help in that process.
Yeah, not knowing exactly where that is, I'm having a little time, I guess, visualizing it. But basically, we aren't going to, I guess our project is going to flatten slopes and so forth right to the end of our project. If it's beyond the limits of our project, there isn't much that we can do about it at this time. I guess we're kind of limited in scope on what we can do as far as the limits of our project. So I think, I don't know if John or someone else from MDT wants to jump in there. I don't know if there's any other efforts to further review between our project and the city limits of Stevensville.
Yeah, I guess, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm not familiar if this one dip south of Pine Hollow if it's in the project area, likely the dip will be mitigated to some extent. If it's outside of the project area, we're constantly, picking. We recognize there's a high number of vehicle animal collisions in the corridor. So if we have an area that's really specific, we put signs up, but the challenge out here is basically we need to put a sign up that says deer collisions or watch for deer next 6 miles. I mean, there's deer on a heavy number of deer throughout the corridor. So where you typically see those, if we have a known migration pattern of some sort, or a feeding pattern where they feed on one side and bed on the other, or that's a path that they use in great numbers to get to the river. As far as what I'm aware of down there is it's a more dispersed pattern. If there is a really concentrated area, typically our maintenance folks pick up on that because they're the guys that have to clean up the roadway after the critters are struck. That all being said, when we're done with this, if you still have a concern that you think that this is going to funnel critters to an area, or you have concern, please reach out to myself at the highway department, and we'll see what we can do we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bob. When we do these projects and we make these dramatic improvements to a highway like this, it does change a lot of things, and things that you may have foreseen, being an issue over the number of years. A lot of times they're resolved. So I think you kind of have to wait and see what happens when we're all finished. And if there still is an issue, you could report that to MBT.
Thanks, Cody. Thanks, Bob. Next question is about fencing. So wondering if there's any word on where the fencing will be taking place or who the contractor for the fence replacement will be.
Sure, I'll start off with that. So the fencing removal will start to take place here later this spring and so forth. What we plan to do is coordinate with all the landowners on that. And so some people are having fence installed by our team. Some people are having fence installed by others. So there's a lot of coordination on our behalf to make sure that's all happening smoothly. That, if you have cattle behind the fence or whatever, that we're keeping it all enclosed. So I guess maybe Brendan, this is something maybe you want to jump in on, but just know, I guess, that we've got a plan in place to be contacting everybody well ahead of time, trying to coordinate with whatever issues or whatever constraints they have with their fence and try to work with them on that.
Yeah, Cody, we are using the Great Falls fence to do our fencing for the project. We know as we're moving forward from south to north that we will be removing fence, and we are going to try to contact the landowners, give them a couple weeks prior to moving forward. So if you have any concerns or questions with that, please feel free to contact Amy or myself, and we can coordinate as we move north.
Thank you both. Next, we talked about one end of the project, so now let's talk about the northern or the other end. Sean is asking what the south end of the project zone will be relative to the intersection with North Birch Creek Road.
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with the other adjacent or abutting projects that might be going on near here. So this might be a good question for someone from the district. I don't know if Bob or maybe John wants to jump in on any comments they might have south of our project.
I think the question is, Cody, where is the exact end of the south end of the project?
Oh, yeah, it's basically at that Birch Creek Road. So basically we're starting right there. There's a home on the right. And so we're starting right there at that house. And we've got some irrigation. We have to relocate right there. And basically we're going to take off right at, I think there's actually a, actually, there we go. The graphic would help us a little bit here. You can see right at the very bottom, hopefully you can see right at the North Birch Creek Road intersection. We're starting just north of that.
Thanks, Cody and Sean. Hopefully that helped to clarify. If not, feel free to let us know and we can look into that a little bit further, find a different picture and zoom in.
But we're not,
So
sorry,
Oh.
sorry, Katie, I was just gonna clarify, but we're not doing anything to that intersection, correct, Cody?
Correct. Yep. Like I was trying to say, just north of the intersection, we're going to take off.
thanks, John. Looks like that answered that for Sean. Thank you both.
Okay, great.
Next question is about the private approaches. So Jaylene is wondering what will be done for approaches. In other words, what will be, how will private driveways meet the highway?
Okay. Yeah, I'll start off with that. So there will be all new approaches up and down the corridor with our project. So basically what that entails is new grading. It's going to be a lot flatter, a lot wider. A typical approach for a private residence is pretty wide. They're about 24 feet wide across the throat. And so we do pave those for a private approach all the way out to the new right-of-way line. So a lot of people were going to get some new paving all the way out to the fence line or to their property line, essentially. Yeah, farm field approaches are a little different. So if you have an approach out to a field, we don't pave that all the way to the right-of-way line. We pave 12 feet basically from the edge of the roadway. But they'll also be very wide, very flat, and they'll extend gravel basically all the way out to your farm field.
Thanks, Cody.
Mhm.
All right, next question is about Groff Lane. I think that's off of our project, but this attendee is asking if there will be any work happening on the two bridges up Western Groff Lane. And they heard a rumor a couple of years ago that might be widened. So John or maybe somebody at MDT might be a better question for your folks.
So I'll take the quick answer is that that is again, I believe, a county road, it's not an MDT route. I'm not aware of any upcoming projects, but the county could have plans to do something outside of working through our off-system bridge project as well. So I'm not aware of anything, but I'd encourage you to reach out to the county road superintendent and see what his plans are. So it's nothing through MDT is planned in that area.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that. Next question is from Jill and wondering if the speed will remain the same at the end of construction for this project and maybe during. Let's speak to both just on the off chance that we're missing one.
Yeah, I'll start off with that one. So during construction, we will have to slow the speeds down through the work zone, and that's for everybody's safety. So we'll definitely have to do that throughout the construction period. Maybe I'll speak to the final product. There was a recent speed study that was completed. It actually went through the Transportation Commission, and that actually affected I guess it's the most northern mile of our project. And that actually will reduce the speed limit some amount. And so a lot of those speed signs that you see out there currently, they're either going to shift or they're going to lower for about the first mile. And that's an area that has some higher residential use there. There's more approaches and so forth. And so that was identified as a potential location to knock down the speed. And that did happen. So our project will complete that. We will actually put in new signs and get that all in place. I guess, Brendan, do you want to talk about the construction for a little bit?
Yeah, Cody, thanks. So we're, like I said, we're starting with tree removal for the first week. Second, depending on what utility relocates, we are probably going to start with approach pipe for the new approaches that we're going to be paving. So after that sequence is done, we will move into doing the RCP pipe irrigation crossings with the siphons before. Once we complete that, we will start with some embankment for the new shoulders, and then also start the box culverts in the fall. So
yeah, I think, as the work, I guess maybe I'll summarize this way. So work that's kind of beyond the roadway and kind of off on the perimeter, a lot of times we can keep a little higher speed up on the roadway during construction. But once we get into the road itself and we're putting pipes across it, and we're flattening and doing those sorts of things, we've got people and equipment that are all going to be right there up on the highway. So we're going to have to knock down the speeds quite a bit for safety.
Absolutely, Cody.
Thanks, Cody. That's great. And I know we had talked to a lot of folks early in the project about going through the speed study process. So it's nice to kind of see that come full circle and start to be implemented here with this project. Next, Jean has 2 questions. So I'll do them one at a time. First, she is asking if there are additional funds that we could maybe look at applying for to help with the mitigation of animal issues. I am not sure who to toss that one to, but I think Cody, you might be up first.
That's a great question. I'll start. How's that sound? And maybe Bob or someone else at MDT can jump in and probably correct me when I'm wrong. But so this particular project actually has highway safety funds attached to it, which is a very specific pot of money. Because there is such a glaring safety concern along this particular stretch, those monies are specifically set aside for projects just like this. And so we use those monies specifically to go out there and do slope flattening, to try to put wider shoulders and rumble strips. And so we're kind of specific about how we spend those dollars to try to improve the safety of the corridor. When you go beyond those kinds of improvements, then you kind of start to look at other pots of money. And, from a funding standpoint, that gets a little complicated. And I'm going to stop talking now and maybe let the folks at MDT step in for just a second.
Hey, Cody, that was a great start. You spoke very well about it, that you're exactly right. This is a safety funded project. We can do some animal safety mitigation projects. We've got them going in some areas. The challenge is that simply it's expensive. It's really expensive. Because it's not only is it expensive to look at upsizing the box culverts we have, for example, but the size of those culverts required to put an animal through it is tremendous. Most of the critters won't walk through it where they feel tight. And these culverts at 100-foot long, if you approach that culvert and you look through even a 6-foot box culvert at 100 feet away, the far end of that culvert looks like a chunk of daylight about the size of a dinner plate. It doesn't look real welcoming to a deer to want to enter into that thing. So the structures have to be extremely oversized to make them feel comfortable entering them. And then along with that becomes that they're not going to go through it on their own without having exclusionary fencing built. An exclusionary fence is basically a 7 or 8 foot tall woven wire fence that has to run the entire length of the project. Mm-hmm. And in an area like this, what makes it even more challenging and adds to it is there's a tremendous number of homes. So we don't want to put a gate. The likelihood of everybody remember to close the gate when they come home or go out in the morning is slim. So now we're talking about having to put in a cattle guard, and the cattle guard that's required to keep a deer from jumping over it is actually 2 cattle guards. So you can see how these costs just escalate completely out of control. So what we have to do with the project we have in front of us right now, flattening the shoulders, making those ditches, raising the elevation or where those deer are standing. They're going to be standing at the same height, if you will, as the roadway as they're approaching it, so they're more visible. They're not hiding down in the bottom of a deep ditch in tall vegetation, so you don't see them until they jump up in front of you on the road. We're really hopeful. Also taking some of the dips that we discussed earlier out of the roadway. It's going to make the animals a lot more visible to the driver as well. So we need to go through with that process first and just see what we're very hopeful that these mitigation methods are going to help reduce the numbers. If we do see really high single locations, we do look at those, but again, they're extremely cost prohibitive.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Bob. To your point about trying to have that complete connectivity of a wildlife fence all the way up and down a corridor, that's really challenging. And if you don't do it properly, if you can't get it all in place, really what you have to do is you focus a problem somewhere else where the animals can cross, and maybe they haven't before. And so I think we've done a really good job to widen the road, flatten those slopes, and really try to kind of clear this whole thing out so that people have a better line of sight. The speeds are going to knock down on the northern mile. I think in general, the corridor is going to look a lot more safer. You're going to have a lot more reaction time. And also those animals are going to see you as well. So that should really help.
That was great. Thank you both. It's such a complicated issue, and I think that explains it really well. So Jean's second question was actually about kind of the roadway widths. So she's wondering if there will be wider turnouts at access roads for right and left-hand turns.
Yeah, I can answer that. So there won't be any specific turn lanes associated with the project. I think that's kind of what you're asking about, like a dedicated right turn lane to a road or something like that. We aren't going to add lanes in that respect, but there will be obviously those wider shoulders. One thing we're going to do as well is that all the mailbox clusters, we're going to actually widen those to basically have a turnout for the post office. And some of those also coincide with some of these approaches and so forth. So there is some other benefit there with the mailbox turnouts. But specifically the turn lanes, there won't be any turn lane improvements with this project. There's not enough volume to do that.
Thanks, Cody, and thanks, Jean. I think hopefully that was enough. And again, feel free to let us know if there's more that we can follow up on. Sean had a follow-up question, and so he's wondering that once this project is complete, his question is how safe or dangerous will it be for pedestrians to walk alongside the road? He's noting that there's no sidewalk, of course, but that there is that shoulder or the slope of the roadway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can jump on that one. So there will be the 4-foot shoulder, and in a lot of places in the state, that's kind of a standard shoulder width that a lot of cyclists are willing to use, a lot of pedestrians are willing to use. So it's far better than having no shoulder and have those really steep slopes that we currently see, because that puts people right in the travel lane. I think in general, this is going to be a fairly acceptable way for a lot of people to either cycle or walk to and from houses and things like that, residences.
Thanks, Cody. Next question is more about during construction. So Ken is pointing out that there are a lot of vehicles who go pretty quickly through this corridor, and especially during construction, I think that raises that point for him. And so he's asking if highway patrol or anyone else will be patrolling during the area of the project during construction.
Yeah,
Cody, yeah, that's something that we did talk about as being the general contractor, is to contact the highway patrol and the local Stevensville police to mitigate some of those speeds. We will have guys in the work zone and on the existing asphalt. So yes, we will enforce that and make the phone call.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Ben.
and
Go ahead.
that's perfect, Brendan. And I'd just add, highway patrol, like a lot of folks, are trying to do a lot of work with a limited number of people. So we do call and ask them to help patrol our work zones, and even help fund some of the overtime. But they'll definitely do the best they can to help keep us safe and keep the folks driving the road safe too. So.
That's good context, John. Thank you. Next, there's a question, a follow-up from Jill. And I don't know if it's necessarily for today, or we could maybe speak at a higher level and then follow up with Jill offline. But she's wondering if there's any room for discussion on how the alignment of their approach might be configured. So I don't know, Cody, if you wanted to take a stab at kind of the higher level, and then maybe Jill, we can follow up with you afterward to talk more specifics.
Sure. Yeah. So we should definitely follow up on this one, but because I don't know all the specifics, but we do have some flexibility to make a few little tweaks and adjustments to make it right. So Jill, why don't you follow up with us after the meeting, and we'll take a look and see if there's some things that we can do to make that work for you.
Thanks, Cody. And Jill, I believe we have your contact information. So if Amy doesn't hear from you, she'll give you a call and we can go from there.
Perfect.
Next, and our last question is from Jaylene. She's wondering why the section just north of Pine Hollow Road isn't included with this project. And we know that it's kind of, she uses the term funky. We've heard some other similar nomenclature. Just wondering why that may or may not be part of this project.
Well, I guess I'll just start off, Katie, for just a minute here, maybe turn it over to the MDT folks. But we did hear a lot about that during the public involvement efforts we had a year and a half ago. And that's definitely something that's on a lot of people's minds. I know there's a lot of foot traffic and cyclists and so forth. And so I'm sure there is a lot of interest and so forth with that stretch that connects from basically our project to the city limits. I don't know what's being done about that. I'm not sure if there is any update or any information from the MDT folks about that.
Yeah, we don't have any other projects scheduled for that right now, Cody. As you said earlier, it is a safety funded project and really with the intent of addressing a specific crash trend.
Mm-hmm.
Really the crash trend doesn't extend past that. And so, essentially we have to draw a line somewhere. And for this project, that's just where it landed. It didn't make sense to redo that intersection with this project.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe add to that a little bit. So expanding on what John's saying, so the 5.9 miles, almost 6 miles that we're going to do, the specific crash trend was that vehicle departing and leaving the roadway. And then a lot of times that vehicle actually rolls. And so we're trying to address that particular crash pattern with these safety funds. So the issue then from that point at Pine Hollow Road going to the city limits, that's a bit of a different problem. And so our project really can't address that. We're looking at focused on this one issue. We're trying to take care of that with the project.
Well said, Cody and John. Thanks for that additional context. That looks like the last question that I have in my queue. But for everybody else that's on the line, feel free to add those into the Q&A. I mean, we certainly have time. Our project team is here. We're happy to answer any of your questions or certainly follow up with Amy or give us a call on that project hotline now or anytime during the duration of this project. We're around, so we're happy to help however we can. And seeing a couple of comments come in of just folks saying thanks for the information. And there was a comment earlier, Brendan, I wanted to make sure to pass over to you that it wishes you all and your crews all the safety during the project. So lots of nice well wishes to make sure that everyone can hear and see. I know
Amy, that's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, and it's showing in my queue as well. We don't have any more questions. So as Katie mentioned, if you do have something that comes up, you're noodling on this tonight, send me an email. We'll be in contact. But in the meantime, I really appreciate everyone for attending and asking these great questions as well. And hope everyone has a great night. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.